There's a specific kind of silence that creeps in when love fades. It's not dramatic, not explosive. It's just quiet, a dull hum that blankets everything. That's what my house had become. We used to laugh. We used to touch. Jessica and I had been married for 8 years, and for the first 6, it felt like we were still dating. The kind of couple that made single friends uncomfortable. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. Morning sex, late-night makeouts, whispered fantasies in the kitchen while dinner burned on the stove. But lately, we barely even looked at each other. It started slowly, the way most things do. I picked up extra shifts at work. She got busier with her freelance clients. Date nights turned into TV nights, which turned into separate rooms and excuses. Somewhere in those routines, the heat died. Not in a crash. In a quiet, stubborn chill. I didn't notice how bad it had gotten until that Tuesday night. I came home late, dropped my bag by the door, and saw her sitting on the edge of the bed in her robe, her face blotchy like she'd been crying. "Hey," I said cautiously, kicking off my shoes. "You okay?" She didn't answer at first, just looked at me with these glassy, unreadable eyes. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, she said it. "I don't think I can do this anymore." That sentence. It was like someone dropped the air out of the room. My chest tightened, and I sat on the edge of the bed, unsure if I was about to get served divorce papers or a breakdown. Neither happened. What came was worse. "I feel invisible," she whispered. "Like I'm just here, taking care of things, carrying the weight, and you're somewhere else." I opened my mouth to argue, to deny it, but nothing came. Because she wasn't wrong. Work had been overwhelming for over a year. I shut down emotionally, like flipping a breaker in my chest. Every fight, every hard conversation, I dodged them like they were landmines. Maybe I thought ignoring it would keep the peace. All it really did was build a wall between us. "I'm not saying I want to leave you," she added quickly. "I love you. I still do. But I feel like I'm disappearing, and I don't want to resent you for it." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I need something," she said. "I need to feel like a woman again. Desired. Seen." Then she said the words I'll never forget. "I'm asking for permission to find myself again. To feel something." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Jessica inhaled shakily. "I want an open marriage." The silence after that wasn't quiet anymore. It was suffocating. "I'm not asking to leave you," she said. "I just want to feel alive. Just for a little while. I need this. And I'm asking you to let me do it without guilt. No questions. No jealousy. Just trust." I couldn't speak. I mean, what the hell do you even say to that? My mind raced. Was I not enough? Was this her way of leaving without leaving? Was she already seeing someone? She answered none of those questions. Just sat there with her robe cinched tight and eyes that dared me to tell her no. And maybe I should have. Maybe I should have fought. Raged. Demanded we fix what was broken together. But I didn't. I nodded. A small, pitiful, wounded nod. "Okay," I said, because I was terrified of losing her. We made rules. Hers, mostly. No talking about it. No details. No questions. No jealousy. And no bringing anyone into the house. This was hers, not ours. That night, I lay awake next to her, listening to the rise and fall of her breath. I wondered if I had just signed away my marriage with that one quiet word. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek, the kind of kiss you give a relative, not a husband, and left the house with a new energy in her step. I sat at the kitchen table long after she was gone, staring into my coffee like it might give me the answers I didn't have. What the hell had I agreed to? Over the next few weeks, things were strange. Jessica smiled more. She dressed differently. She started going out at night, not dressed like she was grabbing dinner with friends, but like she was on her way to something more. The first time she came home at 2 a.m., she smelled like wine and sex. She didn't say anything, just slipped into the shower. I lay in bed, listening to the water run, imagining hands that weren't mine touching her in ways I hadn't in months. Maybe years. It turned me on and tore me apart at the same time. I didn't ask questions. I stuck to the rules. But I started watching her differently. The curve of her hips when she moved through the house. The subtle glow in her skin. The soft little smiles she gave her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. And somewhere in the quiet ache of that shift, I realized something cruel. She wasn't mine anymore. Not completely. I still loved her. I still wanted her. But now I was a spectator in my own marriage, and that was a special kind of hell. Until Brianna arrived. Jessica's younger sister. Fresh off a breakup. Staying with us for a couple of weeks, she said with that easy, flirty smile she always had. I hadn't seen her in years. She walked into our house like she'd never left. Barefoot, wearing one of Jessica's oversized sweaters and shorts that barely covered anything. She tossed her duffel on the couch and winked at me as she flopped down beside it. "Long time, big brother," she said, voice teasing. "Looks like you've got a full house. And a very interesting arrangement." I raised a brow. She grinned. "Oh, Jess told me everything." And just like that, the house got hotter, louder, riskier. But I'll save that for next time. The first thing I noticed about Brianna was the scent of her perfume. Warm, citrusy, just a little spicy. She hugged Jessica in the foyer like they hadn't seen each other in years, even though it had only been a few months. Then she turned to me, cocked her head, and gave me that same smirk I remembered from the early days of dating Jessica. "Still got that jawline," she said with a playful nudge. "No gray hairs yet." "Impressive." I forced a smile, caught somewhere between amused and disoriented. This wasn't the little sister I remembered. This version of Brianna had grown into her body, all hips and curves, legs that seemed to go on forever. She had this casual sensuality about her, the kind that didn't try to be sexy, just was. She breezed into the house like she belonged there, setting her bag by the stairs, kicking off her boots, and flopping on the couch in one fluid motion. Jessica laughed. "You always make yourself at home. Why change now?" Brianna shot back. "Besides, your house feels more like home than my apartment ever did." They talked on the couch while I lingered by the kitchen island, pretending to check emails. Truth was, I couldn't stop watching her, the way she crossed one leg over the other, how her shirt rode up just enough to expose a sliver of stomach. She caught me glancing once and winked, then turned back to Jessica like nothing had happened. That night, over takeout and cheap red wine, we all sat around the kitchen table. Jessica was glowing, the kind of glow that only came after sex or a really satisfying secret. And Brianna, always observant, wasn't missing a beat. "So," she said, swirling her glass, "you two finally joined the 21st century, huh?" Jessica narrowed her eyes. "Brie, what? I think it's great. Very French of you. Open marriage. Wild stuff." I cleared my throat. "We're not exactly." No, don't explain." Brianna cut in, grinning at me over the rim of her glass. "I get it. Boundaries. Freedom. Don't ask, don't tell. Sexy chaos." Jessica rolled her eyes, but there was a fondness there. "You're impossible. And you're glowing," Brianna replied, eyes twinkling. "Who is he?" Jessica blushed. Actually blushed. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. "His name's Devin," she said softly. "We've only seen each other a few times. It's casual." Brianna leaned back in her chair, nodding like a proud big sister. "Casual can be fun, especially if it makes you feel something again." Her words landed in my chest like a slow burn match. Feel something again. That's what Jessica had said to me weeks ago. The exact phrase. And now it was echoing off the lips of the woman who just moved into our home. Later that night, after Jessica disappeared into our bedroom, the one I hadn't slept in for weeks, I was on the living room couch with a blanket and a pillow when Brianna walked in wearing one of Jessica's old t-shirts. It barely covered her thighs. "Hope you don't mind," she said, holding a half-empty wine bottle. "Didn't feel like sleeping yet." "Not at all," I said, adjusting the blanket. "Couch life is surprisingly underrated." She walked around the couch and flopped down beside me, curling her legs up and resting the bottle between her knees. "I forgot how quiet it gets here at night," she murmured. "Your neighborhood feels like a meditation retreat." I chuckled. "Yeah, it's great for sleep. Not so great for distraction." She turned her head toward me slowly. "You need distraction?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Lately, yeah." She studied me for a moment. "Jessica told me things got a little cold between you two." "That's putting it gently," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "We went from passionate to polite in record time." "I remember when you two used to sneak off at family parties," she said with a smirk. "I caught you once, 4th of July. You thought you were being subtle." I laughed, remembering the cramped laundry room at her parents' house. "Wow, I forgot about that." "I didn't." She looked at me over the top of her glass. "I used to get jealous, actually, watching how much she wanted you. How you looked at her like she was the only woman in the world." There was a pause. Heavy. Intentional. And then she said it, soft but clear. I used to have the biggest crush on you. My chest tightened. Brianna, I'm not trying to cause trouble, she said quickly, leaning back, hands up in mock surrender. I'm just saying, if this new open thing means Jessica gets to feel something again, maybe you should too. I didn't know what to say. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. She stood up, slowly, deliberately, and looked down at me. Dangerous game you two are playing, she said, her voice low. Just don't forget to enjoy it. She walked away, hips swaying just enough to know she meant it. I sat there on the couch, alone with the scent of her perfume and the memory of her eyes locked on mine. Something had shifted, a spark in a powder keg, and I wasn't sure if I was terrified or tempted. Jessica started going out more. At first it was once a week, then twice. By the third week, she had plans 4 out of 7 nights, each time dressing in that deliberately effortless way. Tight jeans, leather boots, a silk blouse that looked innocent until it hugged just the right curve. She never told me where she was going. That was the deal, no questions. But I knew enough to understand it wasn't girls' night or dinner with colleagues. She came home with her lipstick faded and her hair tousled just enough to tell a story without speaking a word. She always kissed me on the cheek before disappearing into our bedroom. A casual, guiltless ritual that stung more than if she had come home and said nothing at all. Me? I stayed home, worked late, watched documentaries I never finished. I cooked enough for 2, then wrapped the leftovers. I drank wine I didn't really enjoy. I told myself I was being mature, supportive, even. This was what she needed. But deep down, I felt hollow. Jessica was glowing, and I was flickering. The person who kept me from completely unraveling? Brianna. She didn't just fill the silence, she dismantled it. Her energy was different from Jessica's. Less poised, more raw. She hummed when she cooked, barefoot in the kitchen, stealing sips of wine and throwing spices in like it was a game. She asked questions, real ones, about work, about my childhood, about music I used to love but hadn't played in years. One Thursday night, Jessica left around 7 p.m. in a rush of perfume and purpose. Brianna leaned against the kitchen island, sipping her drink, wearing a tank top that clung to her body like a second skin. She's got that post-affair glow, she said, teasing but not unkind. I tried to smile. Yeah, I guess it's working for her. Brianna tilted her head. Is it working for you? That question hung in the air for a beat too long. I shrugged. I don't know. I'm trying. She stepped closer, her tone softening. You know, I always thought you were the good guy. Even when we were younger. You had that whole steady hands, quiet strength thing going on. Girls notice that stuff. Even the ones who pretend they don't. I looked at her. She was closer than before, not quite in my space, but within reach. Her eyes were searching mine, like she was looking for a crack in the surface. You're different now, she said. How so? Lonelier, sharper around the edges, but still, good. Her smile curled, slow and knowing. I always liked that about you. Something inside me tugged. Something dangerous. That night, we made dinner together. Pasta with too much garlic and bread we forgot in the oven. We ate on the couch, barefoot, watching some indie movie with subtitles we barely followed. Around the second glass of wine, her legs brushed mine. Neither of us moved. By the time the credits rolled, the tension between us was unbearable. This slow, aching pulse that made my skin feel tight. She stood to collect the dishes, but paused behind me, resting her hand briefly on my shoulder. Just a touch, but it lingered. And then her fingers curled, not possessive, but intimate. I didn't breathe. You know, she said, her voice barely audible. When I was 19, I told Jessica I had a thing for you. I turned slightly, looking up at her. She told me. She laughed it off, Brianna continued. Said it was just a phase. But it wasn't. I swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? She leaned down, close enough that I could feel her breath on my neck. Because this might be my only chance. Then she was gone, back to the kitchen with dishes in hand and silence in her wake. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room, the ceiling fan slicing the dark above me, Brianna's words repeating over and over in my head. This might be my only chance. She wasn't wrong. Everything about our house was tilting. Jessica was drifting further into the arms of someone new. And here was Brianna, young, radiant, burning quietly just feet away from me. And the worst part? It wasn't just about sex. It was about being seen. The next morning, I found Brianna in the kitchen, hair tied up messily, sipping coffee in one of my old t-shirts she must have found in the laundry room. She looked up and smiled, warm, unbothered. "Morning," she said, like nothing had happened. I nodded. "Morning." She turned back to the coffee pot, casually asking, "What's your plan for tonight?" "Probably the same," I said. "Dinner, couch, background noise." She looked at me over her shoulder. "Maybe I'll join you. I kind of like last night." And just like that, a new routine began. One Jessica never noticed, and one I was growing far too comfortable with. I wish I could say it happened suddenly, that there was some reckless moment of passion that neither of us saw coming. But the truth is, it was slow. It simmered. The nights together on the couch turned into long, lazy evenings. We stopped pretending the touches were accidental. She'd throw her legs across my lap during movies. Our conversations dipped into dangerous territory, favorite places to be kissed, stories from past lovers, confessions meant for whispering in the dark. Jessica never seemed to notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. She was practically living at Devin's apartment by then. The rules we agreed on? No jealousy, no questions. They'd morphed into something colder. It felt less like an agreement and more like an erasure. One night, Brianna and I opened a second bottle of red after dinner. It was a Thursday. Jessica had texted an hour earlier, staying over again. "Don't wait up." I didn't. Brianna sat on the countertop, barefoot, sipping wine while I loaded the dishwasher. Her shirt slid off one shoulder, and she made no effort to fix it. "You always clean up so carefully," she said, watching me. "Like you're trying to keep something in order." "Habit," I muttered. "Some things are easier to control than others." She cocked her head. "You feel out of control?" I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my glass and leaned back against the counter across from her. She watched me in silence, then hopped down from the counter, walking slowly until we were inches apart. She plucked the wine glass from my hand and set it aside. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she asked. "What?" "That night you kissed Jessica against the fridge. Thanksgiving. Years ago." I blinked. "You remember that?" "Of course. I walked in, and you didn't even notice me. You had her pressed up against the door like the world was ending." I chuckled, half embarrassed. "She used to love that." "I would have loved that," Brianna said, her voice low. Silence. My heart thumped so loud I could feel it in my neck. She stepped closer, and then she kissed me. It wasn't shy or unsure. It was firm, warm, lips that had thought about this for too long. My hands went to her waist, almost instinctively, and pulled her in. She moaned softly against my mouth, one hand sliding up into my hair. Her body pressed against mine, every curve molding to me like she'd been shaped just for this. When we broke apart, her breathing was uneven, her eyes dilated. She said no jealousy. Brianna whispered, her hand still on my chest. "Remember? That sentence. The same one Jessica had given me weeks ago. But now it sounded like permission wrapped in sin." We didn't stop. We stumbled into the guest room, her mouth on my neck, my hands under her shirt, both of us desperate in that way people are when they've been starving too long. I peeled her shirt off and saw the tattoo just below her ribs, a crescent moon I'd never known was there. "You sure?" I asked, even though my hands were already sliding down her hips. She nodded, tugging me down to her. "I've been sure since I was 19. We didn't speak after that. The room was filled with heat and breath and skin. It wasn't just the sex, though God, the sex. It was the way she looked at me, the way she touched me like she was memorizing me, like I wasn't just a body but a man worth wanting. When it was over, we lay tangled in silence. Her head rested on my chest, fingers trailing circles on my ribs. "You think she'll know?" I asked, hating myself even as I said it. "She's not asking questions," Brianna said softly. "Neither are you." I wasn't supposed to feel this way. I know. We stayed like that until the hallway light flicked on. I bolted upright. Brianna slipped out of bed and threw on a shirt. We peeked through the cracked door. Jessica had come home early. Quietly. Her purse was on the counter. But she didn't call out. Didn't look for me. She went straight into the bedroom and shut the door. We waited 5 long minutes. Then 10. Nothing. "She didn't hear us," Brianna whispered. I turned to her, guilt clawing at my gut. Not because we'd crossed the line, but because I wanted to do it again. And that scared me more than anything. After the first time, it didn't take long for it to happen again. And again. The shame I felt that first morning. Waking up to the scent of Brianna's hair on my pillow, hearing Jessica's footsteps in the hallway, it faded quickly. Or maybe it just got buried under the pull I felt toward Brianna, the way her eyes searched mine like I mattered again. Jessica didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. She was always out. She had fully given herself over to her affair. The glow that used to be mine was now someone else's reward. She came home late and left early, smelling of his cologne, her cheeks flushed from laughter I hadn't caused. Meanwhile, I was building something else. Something secret. Brianna and I fell into a rhythm. A routine. It started innocently, if you could still call it that after what we'd done. She'd linger in the hallway until Jessica left for her evening plans. Then she'd slip into the guest room without knocking. Sometimes we didn't speak, just touched, kissed, peeled each other apart in that greedy, aching way we couldn't seem to stop. Other times, it was slow, ridiculously intimate. She'd press her forehead to mine, whisper something filthy into my ear, then smile like she wanted to see what it did to me. And she always saw. She saw everything. By day, it was riskier. We kept it subtle. We'd brush hands while reaching for the same plate. She'd text me from the upstairs bathroom, "Your cologne's still on my neck." I'd respond with a half-joke. But my stomach would not. My pulse would quicken. The anticipation became the addiction. I should have stopped it. Every day, I told myself this couldn't last. Every time I heard Jessica's keys in the front door, guilt surged. Not because she didn't deserve the same scrutiny, but because the betrayal had stopped being reactive. I wasn't just keeping up anymore. I was winning a game we never should have started. And God help me, I liked how it felt. There was this one afternoon I can't forget. It was raining, and Jessica had called to say she wouldn't be home until late. Devin's cooking, she'd texted with a heart emoji. I stood at the stove, making stir-fry, when Brianna patted in wearing one of my button-downs, the light blue one she'd stolen from the laundry a week ago. She leaned on the counter, arms folded, hair wet from the shower. No bra, nothing underneath. She wasn't being subtle anymore. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Trying not to burn dinner." She walked behind me, hands sliding around my waist. Her lips brushed the back of my neck. "Liar." I turned. She was grinning, eyes sparkling, bare thigh exposed through the shirt's gap. "You know she's never going to ask, right?" Brianna said. "What?" "She's too far gone. Whatever this was between you and her. It's broken. She doesn't want to know anymore." I frowned. "So you're saying this is okay?" "I'm saying maybe it's not wrong." Her hands moved lower. My jaw clenched. We didn't make it to dinner. She wrapped herself around me right there, up against the counter, panting into my ear like she'd been waiting all day for this, and maybe she had. Her body felt like the only real thing I had left. And afterward, we just stood there, breathing hard, the stove still ticking. The scent of garlic burned in the air. Neither of us cared. Later that week, I caught myself scrolling through photos on my phone, old ones of Jessica and me. Beach trips, dinner parties. That weekend in Austin when we couldn't keep our hands off each other for more than 5 minutes. Back when her eyes still followed me across a room. Now, they barely met mine. I looked over at Brianna, sleeping in my bed, Jessica's bed, curled on her side, my shirt slipping off her shoulder. She looked peaceful, like she belonged there. That's when the fear kicked in. This couldn't last. Jessica might have set the rules, but eventually someone always breaks them. And when she found out, not if, but when, it wouldn't matter what we'd agreed on. It would destroy everything. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I was addicted, not just to the sex, not just to the thrill of sneaking around. I was addicted to being wanted. And that feeling, after being invisible for so long, was harder to quit than anything I'd ever known. It was a Thursday when things shifted. Jessica came home earlier than usual. Not early enough to catch anything, but just early enough to notice that something was off. I was in the kitchen, plating dinner. Brianna had disappeared upstairs 5 minutes before, barefoot and braless, wearing an oversized sweater that probably looked too cozy for late summer. There was a half-empty bottle of Pinot Noir on the counter and 2 used wine glasses in the sink. Careless, stupid details we used to be more careful about. Jessica walked in quietly. She looked around, slow, deliberate. "Smells good," she said, setting her keys down. "What is it?" "Salmon," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Wasn't sure if you'd be home." She glanced at the 2 plates. "Someone joining you?" I shrugged. Brianna said she might come down. Jessica nodded slowly, then moved to the sink. Her fingers ran over the rim of the second glass. She didn't say a word, but I saw the twitch in her jaw, that subtle clench she always had when something didn't sit right. We ate quietly. Brianna never came back down. Later, as I stood rinsing the plates, I caught Jessica staring at me. Not angry, not suspicious, just cold. "You've been different lately," she said. Distracted. I forced a smile. "That's rich coming from you." She tilted her head. "Touché." There was a long pause. The kind where words hang in the air, but no one grabs them. Then she said it. "Are you seeing someone?" I turned. My pulse spiked. "That's not part of the deal," I said. "Remember? No questions." Her mouth twitched, not into a smile, but something sharper. "Right." She walked out of the room. The next few days, the mood changed. Jessica wasn't angry exactly, but something had turned inward in her. She moved through the house like a guest, silent, observant, always a step ahead of where she used to be. She stopped asking if I'd be home. She stopped updating me on her nights out. She came and went like she was moving through a life that no longer included me. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to chase her. Brianna noticed it too. "She knows," she whispered one night, curled beside me in the dark. "Or she suspects." I didn't answer. "She'll never say it," she continued. "It would mean admitting she cares." "Do you think she does?" I asked. Brianna went quiet for a long time. Then, not the way she used to. Jessica had once lit up when I entered a room. Now she barely looked at me. There was no more fighting, no more needling, no more tears. Just distance. Thick and deliberate. But she wasn't stupid. She started noticing things. Bottles of wine running out faster. A second towel used in the guest bathroom. Hair ties left on doorknobs. Subtle changes that only someone who used to love you would catch. And then came the moment. Sunday night. Rain outside. Brianna and I were curled on the couch, half watching a movie, her head resting against my thigh, my hand on her hip under the blanket. We heard the front door open. Jessica stepped in, umbrella dripping, heels clicking. She froze in the entryway. Her eyes took in the blanket, the wine, the way we sat too close. She didn't say a word. She just blinked once. "I didn't realize we were all hanging out tonight," she said flatly. Brianna sat up slowly, brushing her hair back. "You're home early." Jessica nodded. Devin canceled. She didn't look at me again, just walked past us, up the stairs, and shut the bedroom door behind her. The silence afterward was unbearable. Brianna turned toward me. "That's it. She knows." "I think she's known for a while." "Then why hasn't she said anything?" I stared at the empty wine glass in my hand. "Because she's waiting. She wants to see if we'll keep lying to her." Brianna pulled her knees up to her chest. "I can't live like this." "You knew what this was," I said, softer than I meant. She looked at me, really looked at me. "What if we just told her?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know if I wanted her to know. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. But I was about to find out. The dinner wasn't my idea. Jessica texted me that morning. "Dinner tonight. All of us. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." I stared at the message longer than I should have, trying to decode it. No emoji. No smiley face. Just punctuation, deliberate and sharp. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. When I walked in that evening, Jessica was already setting the table. She looked perfect, polished. Hair curled. Lips red. A sleeveless black blouse clung to her in all the right places, and the perfume she wore hit me like a memory I hadn't smelled in years. The same scent she wore on our honeymoon. Brianna came downstairs 5 minutes later, and I felt the shift in the air the moment she entered the room. She froze when she saw Jessica, dressed to kill, wine already poured, candles lit on the table. "This feels formal," Brianna said, her voice too light. Jessica turned, smiled. "Just thought we'd have a real family dinner. It's been too long." Brianna slid into the chair opposite me, her eyes flicking up once to meet mine. I gave the smallest shake of my head. "Don't say anything." We ate slowly. Jessica kept the conversation polite, casual even. Asked about work, cracked a joke about the neighbor's new dog, complimented the roasted chicken I didn't even realize she knew how to cook. It was a performance, and we were her audience. Midway through the second glass of wine, she leaned back in her chair and smiled, almost wistfully. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking a lot lately." "Here it comes." Brianna stiffened slightly. I reached for my glass, pretending not to notice. Jessica swirled her wine. "About what it means to share. To be open. Emotionally, sexually, all of it. I stayed quiet. I used to think honesty was the most important part of a marriage. But I've realized maybe it's not honesty that matters most. She looked up at me. Her eyes burned. Maybe it's how well you can lie to yourself. The room fell dead silent. Brianna reached for her water too quickly, knocking the edge of her glass against the base of her plate. The sound cracked the quiet like a gunshot. She laughed, too loud, too fast, and tried to cover it with a cough. Jessica smirked. "Careful," she said. "Don't choke. You might spill secrets." Brianna's face flushed. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I looked between them, heart pounding in my ears. "Okay," I said finally, trying to cut the tension. "What is this, Jess?" Her eyes met mine and didn't flinch. "It's dinner." "No," I said, sitting back. "This is theater." Brianna was still, frozen, like if she didn't move, none of it would be real. Jessica took a long sip of wine, then set her glass down with a quiet clink. "I just think," she said, her voice syrupy and slow, "that if we're going to be so open, maybe it's time we all shared a bit more about who we've been seeing." She looked at Brianna then, not with anger, but with something worse. Pity. Maybe we've all been a little careless, leaving things out, forgetting to wash a second glass, smelling like the same cologne. Brianna couldn't hold her gaze. She looked down. "Jess," I said, "if you want to talk, then talk. Don't dance around it." Jessica stood, walked to the sink. "I don't need to talk. I already know enough." And then she left the room. Just like that. Brianna and I sat there in stunned silence, the candles flickering on the table, the food gone cold on our plates. She spoke first, barely above a whisper. That was her way of saying she knows, right? I nodded. "Yeah." She didn't scream. "No." She didn't ask questions. "No." Brianna's voice cracked. "That's worse." I leaned forward, elbows on the table, burying my face in my hands. Because she was right. Jessica knowing without saying anything wasn't a sign of forgiveness. It was a declaration of war, and we were already losing. It didn't explode right away. Jessica didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even look at me for 2 full days. That was worse. The house turned cold, not from temperature, but from silence. Every room felt like it was holding its breath. Brianna stopped coming downstairs. I barely ate. Jessica still moved through the house, calm and contained. But her footsteps felt louder, her glances sharper, her silence full of weight. When it finally broke, it was because of a coffee mug. It was Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen, half awake, fumbling with the French press when she came in. Her hair was up, her robe loosely tied, her expression unreadable. She pulled a mug from the cabinet, one of the ones we got on our anniversary trip to Charleston, the one with the lighthouse. She used to call it her favorite. She stared at it in her hands, then said without looking up, "How long?" I didn't answer right away. Jessica turned, mug still in hand. Her voice dropped lower. "How long?" I swallowed. "A few weeks." She let out a breath, not a gasp, not a cry. A breath, like she'd been holding it for far too long. With Brianna. I nodded once. "Yes." She laughed. Short. Bitter. "God, I was hoping you'd lie. Just a little." "I promised not to lie to you." She slammed the mug down on the counter. It cracked, not broken, but damaged. A thin spiderweb of ceramic split down the handle. Jessica stared at it like it was something dead. "That was the deal," she said, eyes still on the mug. "No jealousy. No questions. No lies." "You made that deal," I said quietly. "And you agreed. Because I was afraid I was losing you." "You did lose me," she snapped, finally turning toward me. "Long before Brianna ever walked back through that door. You just didn't want to admit it." I felt the weight of her words settle like dust across my chest. "You know what hurts?" She continued, stepping closer. "It's not that you slept with someone else. I gave you that out. I offered it. It's that you chose her. She was here. She saw me." "No," Jessica said, her voice trembling now. "She wanted you. There's a difference." She moved past me, pacing now, hands clenched at her sides. I was trying to feel something again, trying to remind myself I wasn't just some ghost in this house. I thought maybe if I stepped outside the lines, you'd chase me. You'd fight for us. "I didn't know that's what you wanted," I said. "Because you stopped asking," she whispered. "You stopped trying. You gave me a hall pass because it was easier than facing me." I didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. She turned to the kitchen island. bracing her hands on the counter. But you didn't just let me go. You didn't just let this happen. You brought it into my house. My sister. Her voice cracked at the end, and finally, I saw tears in her eyes. I can't compete with that, she said. I won't. There was a long pause. The only sound was the creaking of the old pipes overhead and the distant hum of the fridge. I'm leaving, she said. Jess, not just for the night. I'm done. I stepped toward her, but she stepped back. No, she said, holding up a hand. You don't get to comfort me. Not now. She walked to the stairs, then stopped and looked over her shoulder. Pack your things. Both of you. I want you out by tonight. The words hit harder than anything she'd said before. You really mean that? Jessica's eyes were steel. I meant it the moment she kissed you, and you let her. I didn't chase her. I didn't beg, because I knew it was over. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She burned the bridge with a whisper and left us standing in the smoke. We left that night. No shouting. No scene. Just 2 suitcases, 1 worn duffel bag, and silence so loud it filled every hallway of that house. Jessica stayed upstairs. The bedroom door never opened. We didn't say goodbye. Brianna didn't speak until we were halfway down the block, our breath fogging in the late evening chill. She really meant it, she whispered. I nodded, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing I had left. Yeah, she did. We checked into a cheap motel off Route 17. 2 queen beds, stained carpet, air conditioner rattling like it was dying. The kind of place no one stays for long. I didn't care. It had a lock and a door that wasn't Jessica's. Brianna tossed her bag on one of the beds and sat down, arms folded. She looked smaller somehow. Not in stature, in spirit. Her hair was messy, makeup half-faded, hoodie zipped up like armor. I brought your favorite, she said after a long pause, pulling a paper bag from her tote. Take out. Indian. 2 chicken tikka masalas and garlic naan. She handed me a plastic fork, offering a small, uncertain smile. Still worth it? She asked, trying to make it light. I couldn't answer. We sat on opposite beds, eating off paper plates, not speaking for a while. The food was lukewarm, the sauce a little too sweet, but I kept chewing because it gave me something to do. Finally, Brianna looked over at me. Her voice was quiet. She always got everything. You know? I turned. Jessica. She nodded. Growing up, it was like she walked into a room and gravity shifted. Everyone looked. Everyone wanted her. I was always the echo, the backup singer. You're not her, I said. No, Brianna said. But sometimes I wanted to be. Just once. Just enough to know what it felt like to be chosen. She wasn't crying, but her voice had that softness, the kind of pain you don't show anyone unless they've already seen the worst of you. I didn't do this to hurt her, she continued. I swear. I didn't come here planning to wreck everything. I know. I did it because when you looked at me that first night, it felt like I finally mattered. Like someone saw me. Not because I was pretty or convenient or someone's younger sister. Just me. I looked down at my hands. The fork trembled slightly between my fingers. I didn't plan it either, I said. I believe you. We sat in silence again. The motel buzzed with distant road noise and the hum of old neon. It smelled faintly of bleach and something vaguely floral. I don't think she hated you for sleeping with me, Brianna said after a while. I think she hated that you loved me. I didn't say anything. Because that part, I wasn't sure of yet. Not fully, but I knew what she meant. It hadn't just been sex. It hadn't even been just comfort. It was connection. Real. Tangled. Messy. And it was mine now. Later, I lay on my back staring at the water-stained ceiling, the shadows of passing cars sliding across the room like ghosts. Brianna was on the other bed, curled under the covers, quiet. Do you think she'll ever forgive us? I asked. No, Brianna said softly. But I think maybe someday she'll understand why. I rolled onto my side, facing her. What happens now? She looked over at me, her eyes soft but steady. We figure that out. Together. I didn't respond. I just nodded. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel like I was free-falling anymore. Not forgiven. Not absolved. But not alone either. It took me a week to work up the courage to see her. Jessica hadn't texted. Not once. Not to ask where I went. Not to ask if I was alive. Not even to yell. The silence between us was no longer tension. It was detachment. I had become part of a life she had already begun carving away. Still, I had to see her. I told Brianna I needed to do it alone. She nodded, didn't argue, just kissed my cheek and said, "You should." I stood at the old front door, the one I'd painted blue just last summer, because Jessica once said it reminded her of Santorini. I remember smiling like an idiot while doing it, thinking maybe it would make her feel something again. Now, I hesitated before knocking. Jessica answered after a few seconds. She looked different. No makeup, hair pulled back, a sweater I didn't recognize. There were no puffy eyes, no signs of heartbreak, just distance. "Hey," I said. She leaned against the doorframe. "Hey." I didn't want to leave it like that. She looked at me, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house was cleaner than I expected. No boxes, no signs of erasure, just stillness. She sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed. I stayed standing. "I won't stay long," I said. "I just wanted to see you." Jessica gave a short, humorless laugh. "Why? Guilt?" "No. Closure." She nodded slowly. "You want closure. That's neat." I rubbed my hands together, unsure where to even begin. "I didn't plan for any of this." "Neither did I," she said sharply. "But we both got lost. I just didn't think we'd end up lost in different directions." "You said the open thing was what you needed." "It was," she said. "But I never thought you'd fail the test like that." I frowned. "What test?" Jessica's eyes locked onto mine. "The test where I stepped away just long enough to see if you'd fight for us. You didn't. You folded." "That wasn't a test," I said. "It was a trap." "No. It was a chance. To wake up. To see me again. To ask me to stay. You didn't. You let me go, and then you gave yourself away to the one person you knew would break me." Her words struck harder than I expected, but I didn't argue. "Not anymore." "Maybe you're right," I said. "Maybe I failed. Or maybe we both did." She looked at me for a long time. And then, for the first time in weeks, something soft flickered in her eyes. "I don't hate you," she said. "I don't hate you either. But I don't love you anymore," she added, voice steady. I nodded, absorbing it like a cold rain I couldn't dodge. "I'm moving out in a month," she said. "Devin and I, whatever we were doing, it's done." He was never it. He was just noise. "And what about you?" I asked. "Where does this leave you?" "Free," she said. Finally. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. I just looked at her one last time, memorizing the face I used to wake up beside, and walked out. Later that evening, I met Brianna at the park. She was sitting on a bench under one of those old sycamore trees, legs pulled up, hoodie sleeves wrapped around her hands like always. She looked up when I approached, but didn't say anything right away. "You came," she said eventually. "I told you I would." She scooted over, making room. I sat beside her. "So," she asked, hesitant, "is this where you tell me it's over?" I turned toward her. "No." She blinked. "No. I don't know what this is, Bri," I said. "I don't know what it's going to be. But I know I don't want to lose it." She didn't say anything, just stared at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she reached for my hand. And didn't let go. 6 months later, we lived in a modest third-floor walk-up just outside the city. It wasn't glamorous. No high ceilings or open floor plans. Just 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a balcony barely big enough for 2 chairs and a potted basil plant we kept forgetting to water. But it was quiet. Ours. And honest. The kind of place where nothing was expected and everything had to be earned. The first month was awkward. I won't pretend otherwise. There were days we barely spoke, just moved around each other like we were waiting for something to go wrong. I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was wondering if I'd bolt, like she expected to be left behind again. But I didn't run, and she didn't retreat. Instead, we leaned in slowly. We went to therapy, separately at first, then together. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where I sat in silence, ashamed of everything I'd let rot, and others where Brianna cried not about Jessica, but about herself, about growing up in the shadow of a sister who never had to fight to be seen. There was no quick healing, no grand moment of forgiveness, just hours and hours of truth. The sex became different too. It wasn't just stolen anymore. It wasn't hungry, desperate, driven by guilt or fear of being caught. It became slow, curious, sometimes messy, sometimes quiet, sometimes so intense I had to stop and ask myself how the hell I'd ever gone so long without truly being touched. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep, but we did make one pact. No pretending, no performances, no silence. We wrote it on a sticky note and slapped it on the fridge. Every time one of us walked into the kitchen, it was there, daring us to live by it. One night, we were making dinner. If you could call takeout dumplings and reheated soup dinner. I was standing at the stove, spoon in hand, shirtless because the AC had gone out again, when she walked up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist. She rested her chin on my shoulder. "Still think I was just a rebound?" she asked, teasing. I chuckled. "You were never a rebound." "Oh, really?" I turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were just waiting for me to wake up." Her eyes softened, and she smiled in that way she always did when she was about to say something inappropriate and meaningful at the same time. "Then it's your turn to cook next time," she said. We clinked glasses, mine full of cheap red, hers of sparkling water because she was taking a break. Not pregnant, not trying, just careful. And in that moment, there was no Jessica, no past, just a woman who had once felt invisible, and a man who had once watched the love of his life walk away. Both of us broken in our own ways, but somehow together, less so. That night, after dinner, we lay on the couch, legs tangled, the window cracked open to the sounds of the city, distant traffic, a neighbor's music leaking through paper-thin walls. "I still think about her sometimes," I said quietly. "I know," Brianna said. "Me too. I don't regret it," I added. "What we did, how it started." "I don't either," she whispered, "because it got me here." She kissed me, slow and soft. There were no more games. No more pretending to be something we weren't. We were what was left after everything burned down. And somehow, what remained was real.